Maya Brooks woke up in her small room on the spaceship at 3 in the morning, when a blue light filled the space around her bed and she sat up fast with her heart beating hard in her chest because nobody should be able to send messages to her room at this hour, and especially not messages that glowed like stars. The woman in the light was the most beautiful and strange person Maya had ever seen, with long silver hair that moved like it was underwater, and eyes that shined like mirrors, and ears that came to points at the tops, and when she spoke, her voice sounded like music and wind, and something that made Maya want to cry, even though she did not know why. The woman said her name was Celine, and that she was a keeper of something called the Starbound Council, and that Maya's ship had flown into space that belonged to her people, and now Maya had to come to their world to answer questions, and before Maya could say anything back, the light disappeared and the woman was gone. Maya ran to find Captain Lisa Grant, who was already awake and calling all the important people on the ship to a meeting, and everyone was talking at once about what this meant and whether they should run away or stay and try to talk to these strange people. And Maya heard herself saying that she would go because something in those silver eyes had looked sad and scared and not mean. 2 hours later, Maya was in a small shuttle flying down to a planet that looked like it was made of green glass and purple oceans, and there were creatures flying next to her shuttle that looked exactly like the dragons from old Earth stories, with scales that changed colors and wings so big they blocked out the sun, and the biggest one had scales that went from dark blue to deep purple, and it flew so close that Maya could see its eye looking at her through the window. Though dragons seemed to be smiling when the shuttle landed, Maya walked out onto ground that felt soft like walking on clouds, and there were tall people everywhere with pointed ears and perfect faces, and they all wore clothes that seemed to be made from light itself, and they all stared at Maya like she was something dirty that had gotten into their beautiful home. A young elf with kind eyes came forward and said his name was Keeper Celine. And yes, that was confusing, because the woman in the hologram had also been Celine. But apparently it was a title, not a name, and he said he would take Maya to see Queen Ashara, and Maya followed him through halls made of crystal that sang when she walked past them. The throne room was so big that Maya could not see the ceiling, and the walls were not really walls but seemed to be windows showing space and stars, and at the far end, sitting on a throne that looked like it had grown from the ground, was a woman who made every other elf look plain and ordinary. Queen Ashara had white blonde hair that fell past her feet and skin that seemed to glow with soft light, and when she looked at Maya, it felt like being seen all the way down to her bones, and Maya tried to bow like she had practiced. But before she could bend even a little bit, the queen stood up and walked down the steps so fast it was almost like flying. The queen took Maya's arm, and the touch sent electricity through Maya's whole body and made her gasp, and Queen Ashara said in a voice that everyone in the huge room could hear that Maya would sit beside her, and it was not a question or a request, it was just a fact. Maya heard gasps and whispers all around her as the queen pulled her up the steps and made her sit in a smaller throne right next to the big one. And Maya wanted to say that this was probably not okay, and that she was just a lieutenant, and that people were going to be mad, but the queen's hand was still on her arm, and Maya could not seem to make words come out. Then she saw the dragon. It was the same one from outside, the one with blue and purple scales, and it was somehow inside the throne room, even though the doors were not nearly big enough, and it was looking at Maya with eyes that were smarter than any animal eyes should be. And when it made a sound deep in its throat, Maya felt it in her chest like a second heartbeat. Queen Ashara still had not let go of Maya's arm, and now she spoke again. Said that humans had a saying about enemies and friends, and that she needed humans to be friends, because something bad was coming for both their worlds, and it did not care if you were elf or human. It just wanted to eat and destroy. Maya felt cold all over and asked what enemy the queen was talking about, and Ashara waved her free hand, and suddenly the crystal walls changed, and Maya could see space, and there in the dark, between stars, was a fleet of ships that made her stomach hurt to look at. The ships were wrong in a way that Maya could not put into words, because they looked like they had been grown instead of built, and they were covered in things that pulsed like hearts, and there were thousands of them filling up the space between 3 dead planets. Queen Ashara said these were called the Devourers, and they were only 3 days away from reaching both the elf home world, and from there they could reach Earth in maybe a month, and her voice was quiet, but Maya could hear the fear in it. The dragon behind them made that rumbling sound again, and Maya realized it was not just a sound, but words inside her head, and the dragon asked if Maya's people knew how to fight a war they could not win. Maya looked at the queen and at the dragon and at the terrible fleet on the walls and thought about her little ship called Wanderer and about Earth so far away and about her mom and dad and little sister back home, and she thought about all the times in history when humans should have lost, but did not because they were too stubborn to know when to quit. She looked Queen Ashara right in her silver eyes and said that humans had never accepted that there were wars they could not win, because if you accepted that, then you had already lost, and the queen smiled for the first time since Maya had seen her, and it was like the sun coming out. The dragon said something in Maya's head about liking humans very much, and Ashara squeezed Maya's arm and said that they were bonded now, human and elf, and whatever happened, they would face it together. Maya felt something change in that moment, like a door opening inside her chest, and she knew that her life would never be the same, and that she had somehow just promised to help save 2 worlds from monsters, and she did not know how they would do it, but she knew they had to try. Queen Ashara stood up, still holding Maya's hand, and told everyone in the throne room that they would prepare for war, and that the human would help them, and anyone who had a problem with that could leave now, and nobody left, but Maya saw some of the elves looking at her with angry faces. The crowd started to break up and move around. The queen finally let go of Maya's arm, and Maya felt the loss of that touch, like missing something she had never known she needed, and the dragon moved closer and put its huge head near Maya, and she reached out without thinking and touched the scales. They were warm and hummed with energy, and the dragon said in her mind that it was called Shadowmere, and that it was not the queen's pet, but her bonded companion and equal, and that it had chosen to like Maya too. And Maya laughed, because she was standing in a crystal palace, touching a dragon, while the queen of an alien race smiled at her, and outside a fleet of monsters was coming to kill everyone. She thought that if she survived this, her little sister was never going to believe her. Queen Ashara said they had much work to do and only 3 days to do it, and that Emma should bring her captain and her best people because they needed human thinking and human crazy ideas. And Maya said she would call her shipwright. Away as she walked toward the communication room with Keeper Celine, showing her the way, Maya looked back once and saw Queen Ashara standing with her hand on Shadowmere's neck, and both of them were watching Maya walk away, and the look on the queen's face was hard to read, but it seemed like hope and fear mixed together. Maya touched the spot on her arm where the queen had held her, and she could still feel the warmth there, like a promise. The war room was deep under the crystal palace, in a place where the walls were made of old stone instead of the glowing crystal above, and Maya sat between Queen Ashara and Shadowmere, the dragon, and she still could not believe this was her life now. The elf generals did not like her being there, and the oldest one, whose name was Commander Theron, had scars all over his face and hands that showed he had been fighting for hundreds of years. And he said out loud that humans were too young and knew nothing about the Devourers, and their ships were like toys and their weapons were like throwing rocks. Maya felt her face get hot with anger, but before she could say anything, Shadowmere's big head swung toward Theron, and the dragon's eyes started to glow with fire inside them, and when it spoke, the voice came right into everyone's minds at once. The dragon said that humans had something the elves had lost, which was the memory of how to be desperate and how to make things work when they should not work, and how to win when losing was the only thing that made sense. Queen Ashara stood up, and her hand touched Maya's shoulder, and that same electric feeling went through Maya again, and the queen said to show them what she meant. Maya pulled out her datapad and made it show pictures in the air of old battles from Earth history, and she showed them how 300 men held off thousands at a place called Thermopylae, and how humans survived a winter in a city called Stalingrad when they should have all died, and how the Mars colonies fought off raiders with half-broken ships and won anyway. She told them that humans did not know how to fight wars they could not win because they had never believed such a thing was real. The room got very quiet, and then Keeper Celine stepped forward and said Maya was right. Because he had studied human broadcasts in history, and every time humans should have gone extinct, they found a way to survive instead. Ethrin said it was just luck, but Maya said no, it was adaptation, and she showed them a recording from 3 months ago when Wanderer had flown into a space storm and should have been destroyed, but Chief Engineer Kate Sullivan had fixed the shields using parts from the bathroom system and 2 coffee makers. Queen Ashara leaned close to look at the recording and asked if they really had modified their ships protection using a waste system, and Maya said yes. And also the coffee makers, and Kate had said if they were going to die anyway, they might as well die trying something stupid for the first time. Queen smiled, a real smile, not the careful one she used in the throne room, and she said she was starting to understand why Shadowmere liked Maya. The dragon made a sound like laughing and said that Maya smelled like cleverness and chaos, and it was nice for hours. Maya and the elf commanders compared their technology, and what Maya saw made her scared because the elves had weapons that could break planets and shields that bent space and ships that moved through dimensions. The humans barely understood, and yet they had fought the Devourers 3 times and lost every single time. Maya studied the reports from those battles and said that the elves had power, but they fought the same way every time, with standard formations and energy weapons against energy shields, and they were too easy to predict. Theron said they fought with honor, and Maya said the Devourers did not care about honor because they were a hive mind that just consumed everything, and you could not intimidate them or trick them with normal tactics because they did not think like people. They thought like a virus. Queen Ashara's eyes went narrow, and she asked, how you fight a virus? Maya showed them medical files from Earth about diseases and plagues and said you do not fight a virus. Where it is strong, you find its weakness and use that against it. And you use the virus' own nature to destroy it. And sometimes you have to burn everything to save what matters. The queen looked at Shadowmere for a long time, and something passed between them that Maya could feel but not understand. The dragon finally said that Maya was right, and that the elves had been fighting like they always had against enemies who played by similar rules, but the Devourers were not that kind of. Ashara turned to Maya with hope and fear on her face and asked if Maya would help them, and if human people would fight next to elves. Maya thought about Wanderer still in space above them, and about Captain Grant and the crew who were like family, and about Earth so far away but so important. And she said she could not speak for all humans, but she could talk to her captain, and she knew Grant would want to hear about this. The queen asked what Maya wanted for herself, and Maya looked at the screens showing the Devourer ships getting closer, and at the elf warriors who had fought and bled and lost, and she thought about what Shadowmere had said about humans knowing how to be desperate. Maya said she wanted to prove that humans belonged in the galaxy, not as children or toys, but as real allies worth having. Queen Ashara held out her hand, and when Maya took it, that energy rushed through her again, but stronger now and with purpose. And the queen said they were bonded now, human and elf, whatever came, they would face it together. Shadowmere's tail wrapped around both of them, gentle and warm, and the dragon said 3 species, not 2, because it claimed Maya as family. Maya felt tears in her eyes, but could not explain why, because something had changed, something big, and Realsha said they had 3 days and they better start working. The queen said yes. 3 days, and squeezed Maya's hand. Maya squeezed back and felt like maybe they had a chance. The war room on Wanderer looked strange now, with human technology mixed with elf crystal displays, and somehow Shadowmere was coiled in the corner, even though the dragon was way too big for the space, and Maya thought it was probably magic, but Keeper Selene said it was dimensional folding, which sounded like magic with a fancy name. Captain Lisa Grant stood in front of everyone, both human crew and elf commanders, and her gray hair was pulled back tight, and her face it looked like stone, and she said she wanted to make sure she understood everything correctly. She said they were fighting an enemy that had destroyed civilizations. Thousands of years old, using ships that outnumbered them 50-1 with weapons that got stronger when you shot at them, and the plan was basically to give them food poisoning. Maya said yes. Ma'am, that was basically it. And she pulled up the design that she and Lieutenant Claire Davis had worked on for the last day and explained that the Devourers ate energy to power their ships and every weapon fired at them just made them stronger. But what if they fed the Devourers something they could not digest? Chief Engineer Kate Sullivan grinned big and said it was like a computer virus wrapped up to look like food, except the computer was a living ship, and the virus was really messed up plasma that would destroy them from inside. Commander Theron looked at the design with surprise on his face and asked if humans really thought in such sneaky ways. Kate said that humans had been hacking systems since they invented systems, and it was practically what humans did best. Queen Ashara, who had been watching the human crew work for days, now leaned forward and said that to deliver this poison, they would need to let the Devourers feed from their ships, which meant lowering shields and offering themselves as targets on purpose. Maya said carefully that elf ships were too valuable and too powerful, and if the Devourers ate them whole, they would just get that power, but human ships were small and weak, and the kind of prey the Devourers would eat without being careful. Nobody said anything for a long time. Keeper Celine said slowly that Maya was suggesting using human ships as bait with living crews still on board. Captain Grant said they were suggesting using volunteer ships only, and yes, there was a chance that everyone on those ships would die horribly, which was why she was only asking for volunteers. And she looked around the room and asked who was in. Every single human hand went up without even a pause. Maya saw tears form in Queen Ashara's eyes, and it was the first real emotion the Queen had shown in front of other people, and Shadowmere's rumble shook the room, and the dragons said in their minds that it had lived 600 years and seen many warriors, but never an entire species volunteer for death with such calm certainty. Lieutenant Claire Davis said it was not calm because they were all terrified, but fear was just information telling you what was dangerous, not what was impossible. Kate added that they had done the math, and there was a 43% chance of survival. They did everything perfect, and those were way better odds than when they crashed on Titan and had to fix the reactor with tape and prayers. Captain Grant said that incident was classified, but her voice was not angry. Kate said they were probably about to die, so classification seemed less important. Now the Queen stood up, and the room went silent, and she walked to Captain Grant, and the two women who led their people looked at each other. Ashara said quietly that if this failed, the Devourers would reach her homeworld in 2 days and consume everything and every person, and every memory of 10,000 years would be gone, like they never existed. Grant said then, "We do not fail," the Queen said. Grant's confidence was nice, but maybe foolish. Grant agreed it was probably both, but confidence and foolishness got humans off Earth and into space, and it had worked pretty well. So Farashara held out her hand, and Grant took it, and Maya saw that energy pulse between them like recognition of two people who understood each other. Queen said that Commander Theron would coordinate the elf fleet to protect the human ships because the humans would need time to position themselves and release the poison. Theron started to argue, but Ashara cut him off and said he must obey, and her voice carried absolute power, and she said these humans were offering their lives for a world they had never seen and for people who had called them children, and the elves would honor that sacrifice by making sure it was not wasted. Turned to everyone and said, in 3 days, the Devourers would reach the Threshold system, which was the last place they could fight before the enemy got to populated space, and they would make their stand there. And her silver eyes found Maya's, and she said they would show the Devourers that the galaxy had new defenders who were young and maybe foolish but not broken. Shatter's voice filled all their minds and said, the old legends talked about warriors who burned brightest before the dark, and the dragon believed they were seeing such flames. Now later Maya stood on the observation deck with the Queen and Shadowmere, and Earth was barely visible from here, just a blue dot among billions of stars. Maya asked quietly if the Queen thought they would survive. The Shashara's hand found Maya Sen held it and said that survival was not the only way to measure victory, because her people had survived for thousands of years, but they had forgotten how to really live and how to dare impossible things in humans. Had reminded them of that. Maya said that was a nice way of saying they were probably all going to die. The queen laughed, a real laugh that was bright and unexpected, and said she had learned that humans had a talent for inappropriate jokes in terrible situations, and asked if this was how humans dealt with fear. Maya said it was one of several methods, and they also used stubbornness and spite and something called anger. Anurjashadamir rumbled with amusement and said it liked humans very much. Ashara squeezed Maya's hand, and that energy flowed between them, warmer now and familiar, and the queen said that whatever happened in 3 days, Maya should know that she had given the elf people something precious, which was hope and purpose, and a reminder that how long a species existed did not matter as much as how hard it fought for what it loved. Maya looked at the space where the devourers were waiting, and then back at the queen, whose trust she had somehow earned, and said then they should fight hard. Enough that the devourers would remember them, either in victory or as the galaxy's most stubborn speed bump. The queen asked what a speed bump was. Maya said it was a human thing. The threshold system was beautiful like graveyards. It can be beautiful with silence and empty space and the weight of endings. Hanging over everything, and 3 dead planets circled a dying star, and now they would see another battle. Maya stood on Wanderer's Bridge watching the combined fleet move into position, and there were 12 human ships, small like toys next to the huge elf warships that surrounded them, and Queen Ashara's flagship, called Eternal Flame, was art made real with living. Crystal and metal that sang with power, and Shadowmere flew around it in slow circles, and somehow the dragon made Maya feel safer even with doom. Coming Lieutenant Claire Davis said they were here, and her voice was steady, but the readings on her screen were screaming, and she said, "Oh God, they were everywhere." The Devourer fleet came out of dark space like a disease made solid, and the ships looked grown from nightmares with pulsing organic parts that seemed to breathe and hunger, and the sensors went crazy with warnings about radiation and biological poison and energy that should not exist. Captain Grant asked how many. Claire said 2,473 confirmed and still counting, and they just kept coming. And coming in the shared communication channel, Maya heard Commander Theron, and his voice was tight with old fear, and he said, by the ancestors, there were more than the last 3 battles combined. But Queen Ashara's voice cut through the rising panic like a knife, and she said, then they had more targets to shoot at, and told all ships to get into formation, and said when the humans were ready. Captain Grant looked around her bridge at Kate Sullivan and Claire Davis and Maya and all the other people who had volunteered to be bait for monsters, and she asked if anyone wanted to change their minds. Kate said with all respect, "Screw these things, Grants." Smile was fierce, and she told everyone on the ship that they had spent 3 years mapping space and dodging dangers and proving humans belonged out here among the stars, and today they would prove something else, which was that humans could stand next to the oldest species in the galaxy and hold the line, and she said it had been an honor. The human ships broke away from the formation and flew toward the Devourer swarm, and Maya watched her screen as the distance closed from 500,000 kilometers to 400 to 300, and the Devourer ships started to move toward them like predators. Claire said they were taking the bait and focusing on the human ships because they thought humans were easy prey. Grant said, then let's prove them right, and told all ships to lower forward shields, and told Kate to start leaking plasma from the side to make it look like they were damaged. Wanderers shook as the shields dropped, and right away Devourer ships rushed forward with weapons like fleshy arms reaching across space toward the human vessels. Maya's screen lit up with messages from the other 11 human ship captains saying they were ready, and Maya knew their names and faces because she had met them all in the last 3 days, and these were people about to die for a chance at winning. Shadomer's voice came into Maya's mind saying the dragon was with them, and Maya looked out her window and saw the huge creature flying next to the human ships. Instead of staying safe with the Eternal Flame, Maya thought back, hoping the telepathy worked both ways, and said the queen would not like that the dragon said some bonds were more important than orders, and it had claimed Maya as family, and it kept its claims. The first fleshy arm hit Wanderer's hull, and alarms screamed, and the ship shook hard, and Maya felt rather than saw the Devourer ship starting to feed and pull energy from their reactor captain, Grant shouted, "No, Kate." Triggered the payload, and every human ship at the same time released the corrupted plasma packets they had spent 3 days making, which was destabilized energy wrapped in fake signatures that read as food to the Devourer's sensors. For a moment nothing happened then. The Devourer's ship feeding on Wanderer started to shake and twist, and the fleshy arm pulled back violently and thrashed around, and Maya's sensors showed failures, spreading through its systems because the corrupted energy was poisoning it. And spreading through its networks like wildfire, Claire shouted that it was working and the contamination was spreading. 2 other ships nearby, and they were trying to disconnect, but could not do it fast enough. Devourer's ship exploded in a bloom of toxic energy that consumed 3 ships. Near Atoll across the battlefield, 11 more explosions marked where the other human ships had succeeded, but victory had a price, and one ship called Swift Justice took critical damage when its Devourer thrashed in death, and another ship called Defiant Hope had its reactor go critical, and the crew had to evacuate Captain Grant demanded all human ships report. 9 voices came back, and 2 ships were silent. Maya felt tears burn her eyes, but there was no time for grief because the Devourer fleet was confused, but they were adapting, and already she could see them changing tactics and pulling back to analyze the threat. Grant sent a message to the Elf fleet saying they were up and to hit the Devourers while they were confused. The Eternal Flame and the other Elf ships unleashed weapons that could crack moons, and the darkness lit up with destruction, and Shadowmere swept through the Devourer formation, breathing not fire but concentrated dark matter that unraveled ship after ship. Queen Ashara's voice filled the communication channel, ringing with ancient power, and she said for every world the Devourers had consumed, and for every soul they had eaten, and for thinking the galaxy belonged to them today, they would learn that we do not break. The battle went on for 6 hours, and when the last Devourer ship finally ran away into dark space, the combined fleet had lost 1/3 of its ships, but they had won, and against odds that should have been impossible. They had won. Maya ended up in Eternal Flame's medical bay, later getting treated for radiation exposure along with the other surviving human crew, and Queen Ashara appeared looking exhausted and sad with her perfect composure cracked. The Queen said softly that 214 souls were lost today, both human and elf. Maya whispered the names of Captain Nina Reeves and Captain Ryan Foster, and said they were good. Peoply Ashara took her hand and said they would be remembered, and she swore on her crown and her life that their names would be carved in the Hall of Heroes on her homeworld as the humans who taught them how to win. Shadowmere's head appeared in the doorway, too large for the space but fitting anyway, and the dragon said the small ones fought like dragons, and it was proud to call them family. Maya laughed through her tears and said humans were kind of idiots actually. The Queen agreed and squeezed her hand and said yes, beautiful brave idiots who saved everyone. 3 months after the Battle of Threshold, Maya stood in the Hall of Heroes on the elf homeworld staring at the new memorial, and 214 names were carved in living crystal that pulsed with soft light, and elf names and human names were mixed together. The hall was packed full with elf dignitaries standing next to human diplomats, and the Wanderer crew wore their dress uniforms while Keeper Celine and the scholars wore traditional robes, and at the center, Queen Ashara stood beside Captain Grant, preparing to dedicate the memorial. But before the ceremony started, Shadowmere's huge form came down from the crystal dome above and landed with surprising grace in the center of the hall, and the dragon's voice filled every mind there. The dragon said that 1,000 years ago its ancestors had bonded with the first elf warriors and chosen each other as family and partners in defending the galaxy, and today it spoke for all dragon kind when it said they claimed humans as well, and any who would harm humans would face dragon fury. The announcement sent shockwaves through the crowd, and Maya saw Commander Theron's eyes go wide because apparently this was something that had never happened before. Queen Ashara stepped forward, and her silver eyes were bright with emotion, and she said the Alliance of Stars was founded 10,000 years ago by 7 species who swore to defend the galaxy together, and over time 4 of those species fell to war and disease and time, and the elves thought they would be the last. She gestured to the humans and said they were wrong, and today they welcomed the 8th member of the Alliance, which was Humanity Captain Grant accepted a crystal token from the Queen's hands, which was the symbol of Alliance membership, and she said humans accepted this honor and promised that humans might be young and foolish and might drive everyone crazy with improvisation and refusal to accept defeat, but they would stand with the elves. In good times and darkness until the stars themselves grew cold, the ceremony continued with speeches and remembering the dead. But Maya drifted to the memorial wall and traced Captain Nina Reeves' name with her fingers, and she felt someone beside. Hearn was not surprised to find Queen Ashara. There the Queen asked quietly if Maya knew what Shadowmere had said after the battle. Maya asked what Ashara said. The dragon told her that humans smelled of fire, but not the destructive kind instead. The kind that gave warmth and light, and the kind that if properly tended could burn for generations. Maya smiled and said that was surprisingly poetic for a dragon, who mostly talked in combat metaphors. Asira laughed and said Shadowmere had depths. And then her face got serious and she said the Devourers would return because they always did, and this was just the first wave. Maya said she knew. Queen said, and yet Maya stayed along with her people when they could return to their own space. Far from the coming darkness, Maya looked at the memorial at the mixed names of those who had died together, and said, humans could leave, but that was not who they were, because humans did not abandon friends, and definitely did not run from a fight. Queen asked even one they might not win, Maya said, especially those because they were more interesting. Queen Ashara linked arms with Maya, which had become familiar over the past months, and said then they would face the darkness together with elf, and human, and dragon, and old wisdom, and young courage, and perhaps that combination would be enough, Maya asked, and if it was not in you, Ashara's smile was fierce, and she said then they would improvise, and she believed humans called it winging, Itmia burst out laughing and asked who taught the Queen that phrase. Ashara said Chief Engineer Kate. A Sullivan had been teaching her many colorful human expressions, and her favorite was hold my beer and watch this. Maya said oh no. The Queen said oh yes, and she intended to use it the next time Theron questioned their tactics. They stood together watching the memorial ceremony continue around them, and Shadowmere joined them with the dragon's tail wrapping protectively around both women. The dragon rumbled and said the galaxy would know of this day when the young species taught the old how to hope again, and when dragons claimed new family, when the impossible became merely difficult. Maya thought of Earth distant but no longer alone, and thought of Wanderer being upgraded with elf technology in the shipyards above, and thought of human and elf engineers arguing loudly about shield systems while sharing coffee and elf moonwine. Maya said the weirdest part of all this was that 3 months ago she was looking for a seat in the throne room, and the Queen had linked arms with her and told her to sit beside her, and Maya thought it was just protocol or politics though. Queen asked, and no. Maya squeezed Ashara's arm and said now she understood that the Queen was not giving her a seat of honor but offering friendship and partnership and saying you belong. Here Ashara's eyes shimmered, and she said Maya had always belonged and just needed someone to show her the place among the stars. In the months and years that followed, the Alliance would face challenges because the Devourers would return in greater numbers, and political tensions would happen, and cultural misunderstandings would need to be worked out. But on that day in that hall, 3 species stood together and proved something important. That hope was not a strategy, but it was a beginning. That courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it tanned. That sometimes the greatest strength came not from ancient wisdom or powerful weapons, but from the simple, stubborn refusal to give Upus. The sun set over the crystal spires, casting rainbow light across the Hall of Heroes. Maya Brooks, who was human and Lion's member and friend to queens and dragons, smiled. The stars had seemed impossibly distant when humanity first reached for them, and now surrounded by allies both ancient and mighty, they felt like home. And if darkness threatened at home, well, humans had a saying for that: to bring it on.